Yeah, so hello and thanks. I'm Jirka and I'll introduce to you the package manifestoR, which has a lengthy title of a tool for data journalists, a source for text miners, and a prototype for reproducibility software. Just a brief overview of what I'll do in the next 15 minutes. First, I'll give you some background about the manifestoR project, which is a political science research project where the package originates. And then I'll try to arrange the features and what I want to tell you about manifestoR according to, or in that little Venn diagram of three target audience: data journalists, social scientists, text mining people, and people interested in reproducibility in more general, because I think that manifestoR has interesting aspects for all of these groups. So first, a little bit about the background. The manifestoR project is one of the longest standing research projects in political science, and it has been collecting and analyzing party manifestos since 1979. Like, the project is going on since 1979. And just to make sure, party manifestos are probably what you think they are. It's the texts that political parties issue right before an election where they state their positions and goals. And we at the project collect them and code them according to a specific scheme, and the major output of the project up to now has been a very highly aggregated index of a left-right score. For example, you can see the Democratic and the Republican Party from the United States moving on a left-right scale over time, with a right shift in the 80s and a left shift basically with President Obama. And these are the things that the manifestoR project basically is famous for in political science. Now, what is more recent in the project is that we tidied up a bit the collection of the actual texts we have and called it the manifestoR corpus. On the one hand, this is a byproduct of a digital work and data flow at the project. On the other hand, there was some intentional effort on digitizing text from our paper archive. And the corpus we compiled has about 3,000 documents. 2,000 of them are actually machine readable. That makes up 13 million tokens or words. And 1,000 of the texts are annotated according to the scheme I'll talk about. So now I'll dive into manifestoR. And as a motivating example, actually, Julia, thanks for introducing sentiment analysis. No, I don't have to do that. This is a sentiment plot, again, of the Democratic and Republican Party of the United States, attaching sentiments to the word nuclear by analyzing co-occurrences and the sentiments of them. And you see that nuclear was positively connotated in the 1970s and then got more and more negative. And instead of power and development, now it's associated more with weapons. And this is just to show you that these are the things you can do with the data that manifestoR gives you access to. But yeah, of course, the analysis themselves are up to you. Just a quick code example of how you get at the texts. So after loading the library, you have to set an API key, because for legal reasons, we are not actually allowed to simply put up all the texts we have in a GitHub repository. You have to obtain an API key on our page and accept the terms of use. But then manifestoR, the package, makes it easy for you to query that database we provide behind an API, basically by using logical expressions, check for the availability of certain documents and download them, and then you can peek at them, and you see at the bottom like some text sample from one of the party manifestos. So the goals of writing the manifestoR package were to make the data we have accessible for political scientists, data journalists, and text miners. And accessible means not only available, but available in an easy way, which is why we directly integrated the access into R, which also facilitates the direct computational analysis of the text data we have. And also, we hope that the way we design the package supports reproducibility in research as far as possible. The architecture of the package itself is very easy. Basically, it queries an API using HTTR, and they communicate in JSON. So now I'll go a bit more into the specifics of the package as well as the data that you can access. First thing again is about reproducibility, because one of the features of the manifesto corpus is that it's an ongoing project, and we basically update it constantly and correct errors, add new documents almost on a daily basis, which conflicts with the goal that we want to enable people to produce reproducible scripts using the package, which is why we introduced MP useCorpus version function that basically sticks or makes the package stick to a certain version label that you can obtain for all the following analysis. So it basically has a side effect of injecting a parameter into the following function calls of the package. Next thing that is special about the manifesto corpus is that, and that might be interesting for people who do text mining, especially with political text, it's a source of documents in about 45 languages. So the good thing is, so here you see a distribution plot, and we have like English as the top language, but also more less common language in the text mining community, like Eastern European languages or Hebrew. So the good thing is we probably have data in the language you're interested in. The bad thing is that it's pretty hard actually to analyze all of the data we provide in one single pipeline, because often you lack tools for a specific language which you have for another one, or they behave slightly differently, which is why one of the goals of the project is also to provide an automatic English translation of the text alongside the original in the future. But also the cross-language comparability comes back in again by the labeling scheme I've talked about. Like the manifesto project actually devotes much of its work to annotating the texts statement by statement with 1 out of 65 policy category labels. So that looks like this. You take a manifesto, take a look at the text, and then actually human coders split it into statements and attach codes that have a certain meaning on a, in terms of policy statements. And you can use, these label set, this is the same across all languages, so you can use that to compare text across the languages again, or to content search basically our database independent of the text. And also the labels serve as a basis for a lot of indicators. For example, the left-right positional index that I've already showed you is basically counting certain labels versus other labels. And I'll call indicator everything that's a function of the data. And the political science community has been very, very productive in coming up with more advanced or additional indicators based on our data set, where again the problem is that since we update the data constantly, the usual workflow that some scientist develops an algorithm, attaches an Excel file with the values they computed based on the then recent version of the data, put it up somewhere on the web, and as soon as we update our data, you get inconsistencies or missing data. So our goal with manifesto was not only to provide access to the data, but also to collect the analysis routines that exist together into one package in an open, reproducible kind of reference implementation. And that was actually harder than we thought. If you've been to the keynote this morning, you heard the term of software archaeology, and we had to do this a lot because some of these indicator functions are already old, or they are documented incompletely, or they are documented in a paper in a certain way, but the scripts we got sent by the authors actually divide by n-1 instead of n, and all these things. And so this was a bit of an effort, and we tried to collaborate as closely with the authors as possible and try to stick to the original implementation, but also trying to make it not conflict with a published description of the algorithms. And our first idea was that this will actually happen automatically on GitHub by the political science community, which did not. I can only speculate why. Maybe in political science there are no incentives to, or little incentives at the moment, for this type of work. Yeah, but this is part of the, I also want to tell a little bit of the story, how a political science project tries to reach out to the software development community. So I'm happy about any ideas. I'll skip this example. And I very briefly want to come to one last point. Since one of the design goals of manifestoR was also to integrate as easily as possible with R's R's major text frameworks, which I think at the moment are TM, tidytext, and quanteda. And I won't go through the entire code, but just that you can take a look. So the corpus object that you get when you query our database with a package is actually a subclass of corpus defined in TM. So basically, if you're using TM infrastructure, you don't have to do anything when you want to analyze our data. It's already in the right format. With tidytext, you have to add one line, which is as data frame. Not surprisingly, and then you use, as Julia already told, basically dplyr tools. With quanteda, it's 2 lines, because it's harder for quanteda to cope with the annotations. You convert it into plain text, and then can input it into quanteda format with a quanteda corpus function. So yeah, I hope I was able to give you a little bit of an insight of what happens when a political science project tries to develop an R package, tries to address different groups of potential audiences, and solve like the problem of reproducibility in practice in a field of science that is where reproducibility is still a bit new, and it's an experiment for the data providers as well as the data users as well, I think. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and happy to take any questions. Yeah, one question, please. Oh yeah. So the question was whether you can use the tools or the data manifestoR provides to track the evolution of group identity and conflict. And I think, I mean, political parties are a very high level of abstraction in that sense, but we do have data about specific, for example, ethnic parties, and you can, like, I think you can do text analysis on specifically these parties. And also what is interesting is to analyze how the use of languages within a certain region has changed, because we also provide data on the, on which language is used when. So I think that would be an interesting field of application for the package. And I saw another question. Actually, the sentiment analysis example that I showed you was like, just to give a very simple application example, and the code looks almost to what Julia presented. It actually uses tidytext, and yeah, if you're interested, I can give you the code, but it does not take care, or this particular example did not take care about negation and these things, but of course you can do because you have the text at your disposal. Of course, it's hard as well. Okay, so I think this is a very specific discussion and discussion.
We do have time for maybe one more question.
All right. One more question. All right, thanks.